Hello, everybody, and welcome to this event in the Words lineup. We've got Jane Munro and Penn Kemp in conversation. I'm your moderator, Phil Glennie, and so we're going to start by introducing each of our poets today, and then each poet will read for 15 minutes. And then after that, we'll have some conversation where we'll include some questions that you can write using the Q&A section of this webinar. And that'll be the event for today. So I'm going to get things started here by introducing Jane Munro. Poet and writer Jane Munro has given readings in Ireland, the USA, Italy, India, and Egypt. In 2012, she moved back to Vancouver after spending 20 years living on the rural coast of Vancouver Island. Her previous books include Active Pass from Peddler Press, Point No Point from McClelland and Stewart, and Grief Notes and Animal Dreams from Brick Books. She's a member of the collaborative poetry group Yoko's Dogs, and with them has published Whisk from Peddler Press and Rhinoceros from Gasbro. In 2015, her book Blue Sonoma won the Griffin Poetry Prize. And she is also a devoted practitioner of Iyengar Yoga, a subject that features strongly in her 2020 collection, Glass Float, and which I anticipate we'll be discussing a little bit today as well. But in addition to these things, she's also a great educator. She's been employed as a professor of creative writing at several universities in BC. She's done educational planning, research and administration, and she's taught many informal writing workshops, in addition to reading to a wide variety of audiences across Canada and around the world. Our second poet is Penn Kemp, who is a poet, playwright, novelist, sound poet, and also an educator. Her literary work and interest in ancient mythology has taken her on extensive journeys to Europe, North Africa, Mexico, South America, and India. An alumnus of Western University, which is where she received a teaching certificate, she's remained engaged in Ontario schools throughout her career, performing workshops in the schools and all around the world to spread the gift of poetry and art more broadly. She is London's first poet laureate and an inaugural recipient among 15 honorees in the North London Centre Honour Roll. She has received the Queen Elizabeth II Diamond Jubilee Medal for service to arts and culture in London. And she has a 2020 forthcoming book called P.S., a collaboration of poems with Sharon, is it Thiessen? Thiessen, from Kalamalka Press. In 2019, Insomniac Press published her collection River Reverie in conjunction with her collaborative poetry films, which can be found on riverreverie.ca. And other poetry books published in 2028 include Local Heroes from Insomniac Press and Fox Haunts from Aeolus House. And Jane Munro's Glass Float can be found in, or Jane Munro's Glass Float and Penn's River Reverie can be found at the Western Bookstore, but you can also pick up Glass Float and Blue Sonoma for $30 through Brick Books. And Penn's in Local Heroes and River Reverie are each available for $20 through Insomniac Press.
$20 each.
$20 each, yeah.
Yeah, and it's $30 for the two books.
From Brick.
From Brick.
Thank you so much. So, with the introductions completed, I'm going to invite Jane to start us off with some readings.
Thank you, Phil. I'm sort of scooting around here trying to avoid the sun, which is shining in unusually in the south windows of my apartment in Vancouver. Greetings to all of you, and thank you for coming to listen. The land I'm speaking from is part of the traditional and unceded territory of the Coast Salish peoples, including territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. Thanks to London Words Fest, especially Joshua Lambier for inviting me, Phil Glennie, our host, Penn Kemp, friend and my companion here, and the team at Brick Books who published Glass Float. I'm going to read 10 poems spanning the 3 sections of Glass Float in the same order as they appear in the book. The epigraph to Glass Float is a quote from The Puzzle of Conscious Experience by David J. Chalmers, who said, "Conscious experience is at once the most familiar thing in the world and the most mysterious." And I'm just going to read these poems. I'm not going to talk very much about them. Convexities. My grandfather taught me, when he gave me painting lessons, that there's no such thing as a concavity in nature. When you study the profile of a valley, it's made up of convexities. I saw this was true when I made contour drawings. Forbidden to glance down, my pencil moved as my eye did along a periphery. When I finished and looked at the paper, my drawing would be little hummocks, some longer, some shorter, linked together. My grandfather also said, art is suggestion. Art is not representation. Morning glory. A morning glory slipped into the front hall, climbed the door frame and bloomed, white trumpets inside the old house. I laughed at its wit and trained it over the top of the door the way one of my aunts trained ivy to frame her kitchen window. Ivy, another invasive species, bindweed and English ivy. Commonwealth countries colored pink on the world map Miss Adenak pulled down over the chalkboard in our third grade classroom. Sprawling Canada, triangular India, England also pink, the mother country. The first time I went to India, I felt as uncultured as a toddler. How to use the toilet, eat, dress myself. Even in a sari, I stood out. A mute boy's sign for me was to tap his front tooth. My hair is now whiter than my skin. Snow coming down the mountain. The bear carries her bulk on human hands. Her snout long, coat sleek, eyes attentive within and without. We both ate huckleberries. She didn't flinch when I fell into the creek. Could I have a life as a blue whale? Could my soul grow an elephant-sized tongue? Ocean yawns, cities before the city surface. She walks in the sun. Steam rises as frost melts. Could I slide my fingers under her guard hairs, touch soft wool? In the back of my mind, a halo of her fur. Beneath the city, lost creek beds. The snow's butterflies dance. The swiftness of what's wordless. Creek plunges in curtains, beaded, shimmering, spray on salal leaves. Before the others wake the day my sister is born, my father's friend takes us to see the eagles. Bluff, dry moss, dry peels of bark under arbutus. Behind us, the forest we climbed through. Below us, ocean, eagle, glides in a slow circle, dives, strikes a wave, skims the surface, then rises. In its talons, a fish. Above my mother's grave, in the place in which we place the urn of my father's ashes, swallows, each on its own trajectory, sweep high, loop, glide low. The next three poems I'm going to read are from the midsection, from Puna to Mulshy Lake. These are poems that were composed or drafted when I was in India in 2014, going first to a yoga retreat for 6 weeks and then to an Ayurvedic and yoga retreat center. So the first one was during the yoga retreat. Yoginis. The art historian showing you her slides observes, it's always night in paintings of yoginis. Sometimes there are stars. The yogini's hair is matted and may be piled up. They wear earrings in their stretched earlobes. Their bodies are shapely and strong, though some may be half starved. Often in medieval mythology, yoginis have bird or animal heads, especially the yogini cult sculptures once placed in the 64 niches around their circular temples. They practiced black and white magic and conducted healings. Women and men came in secret to discuss their private issues with a yogini. This happened thousands of years ago, she says. But today, she smiles at you, Gita is a yogini. You wish she hadn't said that. As usual, you are on the floor. Her slides are on the big screen and her voice is amplified. You're tired of hero worship. No, tired of the distortions it takes to make a woman a hero or superhero. Maybe you're just tired. When you first met Gita, you thought, yes, yoga can be such a woman. The girth, the gait, the green bloomers, her hands, her intelligence of the heart, her capacity to heal others, and as much as possible, to heal herself. How yoga can embrace the complexities of an individual. She calls it donkey work, the donkey work of healing yourself. December 3rd, 2014. Gita's clues against depression, number 1. Today, Gita tackles depression. Like a detective, she's been investigating it. Her father's death less than 4 months ago. Keep your eyes on the horizon, she begins. Widen the gaze to take in all of your periphery. See it on a big screen across the back of the brain, as if it were projected on the inside of the skull. Notice you can still see the ground, everything, without strain. Immediately you're with her. You've learned by trial and error to do this to keep your balance. It works better than fixating on something in front of you, spotting. Gita goes on. If you wear multifocal glasses, take them off when walking around. They make you drop your chin to look at stairs or obstacles in your path. Draw your head back and let the neck rise up easily to support it. Lengthen the little muscles between the neck and the skull. Shine like a full moon without dispelling the dark. Did she really say that, you wonder, the last part? Possibly. Or what she said made you think of it. The moon is close to full. You saw it last night when you got up to pee. December 4th, 2014. And the last one I'll read from this section is from molting. It's from the Ayurvedic and Yoga retreat. Molting. Christmas Day. Shirodhara, oil and other warm liquids infused with herbs drip and stream onto your forehead and the crown of your head. Hair pulled up and clipped back. Your body massaged and covered with warm sheets. You sink deep and deeper into a trance. the moss green board and batten of your former house, and the woman who lived there caring for her ailing husband, split off and float away, leaving a pale, tender snake, skinless now, spreading wide and wider, free to expand until a new hide tightens and markings appear. December 25th, 2014. And now I'll read 3 poems from the last section, Receive Your Face. The first one takes place in Tuscany, where I was again at a yoga retreat. Jasmine. Now the dreams are coming. After jet lag, my unconscious is once again percolating into consciousness. 6, more like 6.5 hours a day of yoga, open doors to orphans and prodigals. The family of myself recollecting after separation. How I got through loss and so much work. Yellow legal pads of to-do lists. But now it is time to embrace those outcast selves, my fragile ones. Rain hitting blossoms releases and intensifies their perfume. A wall of bruised jasmine scents the courtyard. And then back to the West Coast. I should say that Cloud Gates, the title of this, is the name of acupuncture points that were designated by this name by the Han people along, anciently, and that the early settlers or the early migration into the coast of North America came across the Bering Strait. So it came out of the area where the Han lived and then down the coast. Cloud Gates. That pair of eyes at the top of the torso under the brow of shoulders. Cloud gates, hunters once opened to see a way down this coast overhung with cliffs of glaciers, calving into a green sea. Skin boat nosed by mammals, 5 times its size. Bodies known, constellations within and without, named, past as present in front of them, future behind them, upriver, downriver, islands, inlets, fishing holes in frozen lakes. Allure, seen with the eyes of dream, a hunt into the interior. And the final poem in the book, It's Winter, the Gods Love. High and windswept, where rivers begin and snow whirls like Sarasvati circling Brahma, his lust, growing 5 faces to keep 10 eyes on her. But that comes after mountains, moon, sun, an ocean of stars, after darkness and light differ. In winter, the gods shed headgear and garlands, sandals and spears, limbs and vendettas. They shed names. Honed to weightlessness, they flare and drift, rise, buckle, fold, explode from a hierarchical operatic cast. The thinned mesh of their turning sparkles and floats, holds a delta's silt, lifts with snow geese, falls on peaks. Darkness in winter nights ruthlessly itself. In winter days, light frayed through ice crystals dogs the sun before collecting again in moon's gaze. In winter, the gods make do without mirrors, nothing to fog with breath or wink back, and spin out of bounds, infatuated again, desiring their manifold relinquished parts. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jane. And we'll turn it over now to you, Penn.
Well, I have to continue celebrating Sarasvati with a book I wrote, just one poem from this one, but it's just a direct continuation. India is no land for the myopic. It confirms our worst fears that things are not what they seem. India is a lurid purple passage, alluring tourists to false security. Here, nothing is safe. There are holes, wells to drop down over the edge of knowing into being. India is no land for the myopic. And there's Sarasvati. Jane suggested I read this passage from Insomniac Press's book, River Reverie. And I'd like, before I begin, to refer you to riverreverie.ca because Mary McDonald has done this absolutely splendid collaboration, thanks to the London Arts Council, with 3 of the poems, and made video poems out of them, one of which, Wishing Well, is going to be shown in November at the Zebra Film Festival in Berlin. And I'm drinking Earl Grey tea. Jane is drinking Scottish, I don't know.
Scottish breakfast.
Scottish breakfast. Mutative metaphors. My lazy hammock dips and sways, paddled with silver, dappled in sunyard, belying any need for action beyond its own rhythm. I could be brewing Earl Grey from bergamot leaf as I drink lemon balm, peppermint, rosemary. I could make tinctures to strengthen immunity out of evening primrose and echinacea purpurea. Or I could make Bach flower remedies from impatience, chicory, clematis to ward off moods. I could soak roses and heliotrope in oil for attar, or cream skin ointment from orange calendula. I could stir fry those glorious trumpet squash, stir starflowers of borage into salads. But all that activity is for other years. I leave valerian and foxglove growing unadulterated. This garden I am lazily pleased to watch parade its seasons and fall, as though my gaze were enough to bestow medicinal property. By osmosis, direct through vision. Flowers tell their own time. A continuous measure of light, soothing and sequential. Before I lift a finger, they are already mulch. And next winter will have to rely on my mind's eye for balm and taste's solace. A river of words on the Thames floating downstream. suddenly. I skipped a little bit there, but this new poem is suddenly. Enter birdsong's particular tone or pitch, an addition of whistle, glide, repeated chortle. Enter wild springing fern, growth of cedar. Enter rivers, ongoing ripple breaking against its bank. Enter sun, midsummer night's eve. Enter light, transmutation. Enter bud. Enter purple garden of comfrey, iris, sage in bloom. Enter rock, pitted limestone worn down by water. Enter heron and white-capped woman stalking the marsh, her old black dog wagging behind. Enter the bog, the margins of marsh. The doctrine of signatures. My signature is a sore throat. Seasons have their hues. Ours is sun-steeped translucence, lit from within till it brims over. Interjections interrupt a trail we conceive as real. The present as gift, as presence, the only possible way through, way in. Memories weigh in, wedged as if they were real. Futures impinge as if secure. Females done beside their bolder mates, goldfinch cross the sky in graceful loops of liquid flight and song, sway on green fronds that bow under light weight to the doctrine of signatures. Cedar or bohemian waxwings twitter among bare boughs on their way warmward. Goldfinch, cardinal, dragonfly, all hightail in on the updraft, waiting for wind to shift at the red round of setting sun. The flock alight and lift on a single breath. South, south, sweet wind, carry them safe in light flight. Goldenrod, scimitars flash solid arabesques of late summer, late afternoon, late in our lives for such luminous entrance. River, reverie. Water abounds here with this river, 5 times normal width for winter, flooding roads and parks. The swell carries whole trees along, stampeding currents. Yellow willows drop 50-year-old boughs in high winds. Standing waves cover the usual walking path. Climate change is certainly upon us, from 11 below to 11 above in hours, sinking back below freezing. Green begins to bury the remnants of flood, the wall of last fall's leaves, packed level against link fence. Weird how all reverberates in spring clarity as old detritus is dredged. Believe. This is one of the poems that became a video poem on riverreverie.ca. In the space of a year, Ula has learned to sit, to stand, to walk, to totter forward in a run. She has seen one full round of the seasons. She wraps her family around her little finger. Now, just before dusk, We stroll hand in hand to witness the evening ritual of geese return. Gliding along the Thames in formation, they skim overhead, flapping slow time in sync. She studies their procedure, dropping my hand to edge forward, neck outstretched, arms aerodynamically angled. She flaps and flaps along the bank, following their flight, ready for that sudden lift. Again, till the last goose has flown. Dragging her heels home, disconcerted, she braces her body against the rising breeze, bewildered that she too can't take off to sky. But game to try again tomorrow, convinced the bird's secret will soon be hers. Winds chime. Poets give voice to the voiceless, the language we don't understand. A breeze ripples throughout all the aspen siblings down to roots they share across a single source. Source, source, spring, sing, sorcery. A single tree may live a century in clonal colonies while its system of roots lasts millennia as the oldest living organism. What would one trembling giant whisper across the river to its neighboring clone? Hold on, hold fast, changing, elementum mingle in slow, shaky syllables. And silver leaves quake response. And this piece, Among the Parasols, was put to a video piece, a video poem by local fantastic artist Dennis Siren. And to the all the videos that are connected to the poems are linked by these things, whatever they're called, I can't remember. Anyway, you put your smartphone up against it and you'll hear the video poem. Among the Parasols. QR codes, thank you, Josh. About us milkweed silk parachutes dance. We catch the work, the word, light, play, patterns. How we toss to and fro, expectant, midway through our lives. Almost mature, almost coming into our own. Seed potency bursting beyond hard casement through the boundary of design. Oh. Really? I was tempted to read one from Fox Haunts, which is from Aeolus Press. And one of Jane's poems made me think of it. The other connection is that, as we know, London is in a bowl, and that convexity of Jane's grandfather's poem, the poem about Jane's grandfather painter, reminded me of that. And also that we share, this is getting into conversation, Phil, but we share a visual background in that my father was a painter, Jim Kemp, and as was Jane's grandfather. So I think that visual comes through sound. So I'll end with this one. Steal, stole, stun. The dried heads of black fox hung from my grandmother's stole as if ready to strike. dead flat button jet, eyes shut tight to their own secret wiles. When she turned to talk to me from the front seat of Dad's Meteor, the foxes would swing and turn back as if they too had something to say. And what they whispered was darker than words, darker than the deepest lake they drowned in. That dark knew how to spread and fill the entire car. Their dark buried my grandmother's kind words in black ink. They buried her and her stories of wild Irish banshees wailing on roofs to warn us of imminent death. I'm not sure I can stop on that one, but probably will, unless something comes up. I guess what I was thinking about with that one, Jane, is how you use space, the yoga of space, to spread consciousness throughout body and soul. And that poem, in a darker way, the foxes spread too. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pen. And so now we're going to take it to the discussion, and I'll keep an eye out for questions coming in as well. But you know, we had a chance to chat earlier this week, Jane and Pen, and I think that one thing that's really had a major impact on both of your careers as poets and lives is the travels you've had, and we spoke especially about India and Egypt. Pen, so you've traveled to India extensively. You've taught poetry workshops there. In 1995, you served as writer-in-residence at the SNDT Women's University in Mumbai. And Jane, I know you've traveled there a number of times and are a passionate practitioner of Iyengar yoga. And I just wanted to ask the two of you to just maybe chat a little bit with each other about your experiences in India and how they've shaped your poetry and your lives.
Yeah, I think it was really for both of us. They were pilgrimages. Mine more decidedly Buddhist, and I traveled followed the path of the Buddha through northern India, and then later was writer in residence through a number of states in India. But the difficulty in writing about it all is not to exoticize the other, and yet be true to our own experience, meeting the other, and realizing that we are the other. And I love Jane's sense of assimilating all the different selves in what I think the last poem she read about bringing all the different selves that had been forgotten in busyness and sorrow and grief, and bringing the neglected selves together. And in a way, travel lets us do that. It mirrors the other, and we can bring it to a new wholeness.
Right.
That's great, Pen. I agree with you on that. Certainly, India was amazing and multiple and colorful, always colorful, and always fascinating, always engaging. And I went first in the 1980s 3 times, and stayed with a friend with his family and relatives, and traveled around much of India in those years. But then I came back after I was working on Iyengar yoga here, and went 4 times to Pune, where the Iyengar Institute is. And each time I also went to the Ayurvedic and Yoga Retreat Center in the Western Ghats at Mulshy Lake. and that was all very important to me. It was a great opportunity to do intensive yoga in the tradition that I was following already and still do. So that was great. And also I found the Ayurvedic treatments very healing and restorative and energizing. So they were very beneficial. And I think, Penn, your herbal, you as an herbalist are linked in ways to the Ayurvedic traditions.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I followed the Ayurvedic path, and I'm making my own kombucha on kettle water. And I'll share it with you. It's good. Just add enough ginger and you're fine. But I was thinking of the 18th century tradition, which thought that painting dealt with space, and poetry dealt with time. And I think about travel, especially to India and to Egypt, where we both spent considerable psychic time, if not literally physical much time, but nonetheless psychic time. You're meeting such ancient cultures, and you're in the contemporaneous part. I remember Gwendolyn McEwen telling me not to go to Egypt because she was terrified of modern Cairo. And there's such a discrepancy between the modern hunking, shall we say, and leave it at that, and the huge breadth and breadth of 5,000 years of culture.
Yeah, I did go to Cairo. I was lucky enough to be invited to participate in the Cairo Literary Festival in 2017. And so I was there for 10 days, and that was absolutely fascinating. And my guides were a couple of students from university students studying English. So their English was really good. But it was fascinating. And we went to their homes and other places. And I spent a lot of time in museums. And we also went to Gaza and saw the pyramids and so
Giza.
on. And Giza,
Okay.
I'm sorry, not Gaza. At Giza. And it was exactly that mix of the stress and trauma of the contemporary situation in Egypt and the post-revolution, brewing revolution, discontent, dislocation of people. The taxi driver who became one of my main guides was a lawyer who couldn't earn enough money as a lawyer to house his family. And so he didn't work very much as a lawyer anymore. He worked as a taxi driver to earn money. And the Muslim girls who were my hosts and companions invited me to one of their homes for lunch, and their mother was in a full mask and all totally covered up in brown ankle length gown. And she cooked this most wonderful meal for us, and there were about 13 of us there that day. And when I asked if I could take a photograph of her, she took her mask down so I could see her face and photograph her face, which I thought was very sweet and intimate. But I don't pretend to understand the thinking, but I could see the incredible love and bonds and intelligence and capacities of the girls and their families. So
it's interesting. I spent time in Morocco in 68, 69, and then Egypt much later, and wrote about Morocco in Changing Places from Fiddlehead Press, and Egypt in a book that Mona Furtig did called Sweet Ancient Egypt, and then I can't say, I thought I brought it out, but another book called Helwa, which is Arabic for beautiful. And I was struck by the immensity. I had been chosen and was set between the pause of the Sphinx for 2 nights running, and then also set alone in the depth of the third pyramid for the entire night. So I had this huge experience of vast spaciousness.
Wow.
But I don't know where you want to go with that one, Bill.
Well, it's when you talk about the spaciousness, I mean, it does kind of lead into, the fact that I've heard both of your poetry described as open-hearted. And I was just going to ask, do you see your poetry as particularly open-hearted, and do you consider that essential to what you're trying to do as
it's
a poet?
Essential to my practice as a person, and having just read Glass Float, you'll be amazed by how Jane responds with Gita's teachings. But to connect head and heart, to speak from the heart. I've been working with Harold Renish in trying to write more Orphic poetry that the heart speaks without being sentimental but to connect all the realms, the physical and the metaphysical and body, soul, spirit, mind, all of it, but allowing the heart to lead and to write from complete and utter vulnerability. And for a Londoner, that's very difficult. We're used to being indirect.
Yeah, I don't think actively of being open-hearted, but for me, poetry is an architecture for the imagination, and I really want to create poems that are open spaces that other people's imagination can come in and bring their own experiences to and furnish them and dwell in them in a way that will enrich their lives or give them a place where they feel at home, and completely their whole self, as Penn said. We tend to get stuck in the brain or stuck in our must-do level of thinking, and so to have I have tracked dreams for years. I even this morning I woke up and wrote my dream first thing, and I do this because I feel that what it does is that it allows the parts of my body's mind and my own whatever, I don't even want to call it mind, my own unconscious, to come into a more conscious layer of my mind and be recognized, be something that can give what it has to give to me in the day-to-day and in the poetry, definitely in the poetry.
It makes me think of something.
Well, you notice that we both, not by planning, are wearing red rib sweaters. The ventricles of the heart are speaking.
Yes. No, it makes me think, Jane, of in Glass Float, your poem "Hearing Aids." There's a line in there where the speaker says, "I don't think it matters how we explain intuition. What I recognize is the visceral click, the embodied knowing, and the attention to what is not produced at the level of habitual mental ruts."
Yeah.
So I found that interesting, just because you were contrasting intuition not just with consciousness, but with sort of rut-based consciousness.
Yeah, thank you, Phil. That one of the other things about that particular poem is that it's really a little short story, and there are a number of different kinds of pieces in Glass Float, quite a few prose poems. That one, which is almost a story or an essay, and as well as the lyric poems. So I did feel after Blue Sonoma that I wanted to write something quite different and do something quite different. I didn't want to do the same sort of thing that I had done with Blue Sonoma, and actually I wasn't able to. It was a different time in my life, and so I did a lot of the prose poems and more more attention to the voices around me and outside me, but also the voices as they come into, those voices are remembered and how they influence me and shape me in my practices, but also just in my life.
Yeah, I mean, when you specifically talked about the habitual mental ruts and
Mm-hmm.
intuition being something that can, help you get out of that, it really reminded me of that. I think that I'm paraphrasing, but that famous line from Kafka when he talks about art should be an axe for the frozen sea within us. Um,
Lovely.
and I've always really loved that description of, because it really, and your line really reminded me of that. And Pen, I was wondering if I could ask you about the question of intuition as well, and specifically because in your poetry you talk a lot about intuition, but you do also speak specifically about the importance of ceremony in creating a space, an intention in intentionally creating a space for intuition, and you could say the calling forth of the muse. And I'm just wondering, in a time when we're all kind of indoors a lot, and it looks like that's going to become more the case moving forward. I think a lot about, what little ways do you think, can that ceremony be performed, at home, or, when we're trying to access intuition?
I think it's the only way to live through this extraordinary time is in a spirit of ceremony that allows for the moment to be enough in itself, so that we're not living outside of the present moment in wishing we were traveling or wishing we were having tea in Vancouver with Jane or whatever. It seems to me that I'm at my most spacious when I'm living in ceremony, and that is just simply having a nice sharing a cup of tea with you, but being very present. So ceremony for me literally translates as presence in the moment. It doesn't mean doing anything. It means, Jane has a poem that is a shamanic exercise in my memory of sinking down, watching the horizon, having your eye on the horizon and spreading the peripheral out to that. And I thought of that as I was learning to look at the camera rather than at your eyes. I normally want to, pick up cues but here I am looking at this black, empty hole and pretending that I'm seeing you, but I'm catching you by the peripheral vision. So it's that stretch from the minutia from the minute to the moment.
Mm-hmm.
That's so well put, Penny.
It's your poem.
Yeah, but you linked it all up together. I'm skirting the sun here. I'm sorry, I'm moving around so much.
Send some this way.
The yoga that I practice, the Iyengar yoga, is done without any mirrors. And so the whole thing is to be able to observe the inner self and find the body alignment internally. So I do find that spreading the gaze to the periphery is very stabilizing. I mean, just this morning when I was practicing, I was trying to do the tree pose, and I just found that I was a little distracted thinking about preparations for this, but as soon as I could spread my gaze at the back of my skull out to really broaden the periphery, I stabilized.
Mhm. Well, this kind of
It's a
goes
really good metaphor for living during the pandemic and forever. What else?
I think so.
Yeah, and to that same point, I mean, I think that you know, it does go into the broader question of, you know, as poets, uh, how do you sort of structure your days nowadays, or do you feel the need to? But like, is there anything that you're doing currently in your work to structure your days that would not have been the case pre-COVID, or?
I'm lucky enough to be, to the surprise of my friends, to be quite a happy introvert. So my day is very much the same. I work in the morning. I don't talk to anybody before 4. I have a sort of lunch with Gavin, my husband, at 4. I go off to Aquafit or a walk, and it's a very quiet life, and I'm happy. But on the other hand, we're in a field of such anxiety, and the anxiety is fueled and fed by everything that's happening around us. So there's a huge amount of suffering in the field that is that we're all bearing, and bearing up and bearing down.
Yeah. And Jane, actually, I wanted to ask you about depression specifically, because we've had a question come in asking you to speak a bit more about the poem in Glass Float, where Gita is talking about depression, and this notion of how spreading your gaze to the periphery it is in a sense a response to that, or an attempt to engage with that. Can you say a little bit more about that poem where Gita is talking about depression?
That was the first of 3 poems in Glass Float, called Gita's Clues Against Depression. And she does also talk, in other poems in Glass Float about the need to break the fear and spread our consciousness, spread the soul. Her father, B.K.S. Iyengar, said in an interview that I did with him that as we get older, the practitioner can't do so much, but can do deeper, and so needs to do the practice as a seeing, so that you see spreading the soul on the interior of the self. And so it's an actual spreading and expansion. And Gita talks about the multiplicity of ourselves. It's not a single pointed focus. We need to accept that we are multiple, and that we have different parts, including parts that get depressed. And that if we can lengthen the spine and find a comfortable way of expanding vertically and horizontally and cylindrically, she says, let ourselves spread and be fully ourselves, and accept the parts of us who are diverse.
There was something very visceral I found when you talked about that sort of expanding cylindrically, and I think that one of the poems also mentions that you can, when you engage in that practice for a while, you can just look at someone on the street and know if they've engaged in some of these practices, and I just found that really interesting. Yeah.
Well, I've one of the things that I've been doing during the pandemic is that I have been doing pranayama, the breathing practice, every day, which I've always admired people who did it. I can tell the people who have that practice in their lives. And I've certainly done it, and I've studied it, but this is the first period when I've really every day done it. And along with my asana practice and other practices. So it's true. I have a sense of the gifts of these practices. I can tell it, for instance, Penn that you practice. And so it's just something about the integration and stability and energy that people bring when they have these practices.
Mhm.
And the compassion, I guess.
Mhm.
Always, yeah.
Yep. We've had a question come in. Jane, you talked about how you want to create imaginative structures which readers can enter, the heart, intellect, spirit. Can both of you say a bit more about how you see your relation as a writer to the reader?
Well, I just described the listener as a great black hole.
I think actually another person asked with triple question marks, are you calling us big black holes? So I guess
You
I'll
contain multitudes. That's
Yeah,
what you
okay.
contain.
Okay. So in
As we
a
do.
good way, in a good way.
Yeah, in a very good way. Black meaning holding everything as possibility, plenitude, potential.
Mhm.
And for me, I see people as I see, well, I think I always think of the reader as capable and intelligent and bringing a full self to the poem and feeling but also I want to make the language and the structure as clear and simple as I can, so that it is like something like a room you could move into and furnish yourself.
Mhm.
I don't want to obscure, but I do want to suggest various ways of thinking and imagining, so that it could be more than one room. It could expand.
Mhm.
Phil, I have a
Yeah.
question for you.
Okay.
Have you more patience with poetry after this hour with us?
Okay. So there's a bit of a background here, but I was asking Penn and Jane earlier this week about the importance of patience in poetry, both in writing it and in reading it. And I think that I think that it's something that I'm always trying to cultivate. I think it's my relationship to poetry is a bit um, I don't know how strange it is, but poetry for me has taken sort of the place that prayer had when I was younger, in the sense that I turn to it only in emergencies.
Funerals and weddings, I believe.
No, but I think that I think there is
I love it.
it's a sort of remedy to um, those mental ruts that Jane is talking about, where it's just like, you become so immersed in routine and, I would say it's deadening effects, that it requires something um, it requires something stronger than a plot-driven novel. It requires a sort of that level of attention on language and something explosive.
It's so much is conveyed, so much is transformed through sounding the poem. So my prescription to you is to read a poem aloud, either before you go to sleep and then watch what your dreams come up with, or in the morning to set your intention for the day. Just the sound is the primeval. It comes from being within the mother's womb. It's the most basic sense, and I think poetry conveys that presence through sound.
And
I hardly read it. I read them aloud.
Yeah, I always compose aloud. I mean, that's an essential part of writing for me.
And with all like we've spoken quite a bit about whether it's Iyengar yoga or whether it's the path of the Buddha. We've talked about a lot about expansion and open-heartedness. I was interested in the concept of like dilemma in your work as poets, in the sense of within the course of your poetic career, for the sake of our audience, some of whom might be poets themselves, are there any crossroads or artistic choices you've made in your career that stand out to you today as having been not particularly easy to make at the time?
Jane and I are of an age when we faced a lot of male supremacy, shall we say. So we had to really stand our ground as feminists, as women, as writing spiritual poetry, which was really not in fashion, and to try to articulate that which had not yet been spoken. I think that's what I feel is the common ground between Jane and me, is that attempt to articulate the not subconscious, not unconscious, but that which has not previously been out there in the world as an object, as a spoken presence.
Yeah.
So, and what I recommend to poets everywhere, to people aspiring to be poets, is to read, and read aloud.
And read aloud. Yeah. And how about you, Jane?
Well, it's in some ways it's always a challenge. It's hard to know exactly what were really the turning point places. One of the turning points for me was after I retired from earning a living and chose to focus mostly on writing and caring for my husband, who was declining at that time. And I got a letter from a friend of mine who, to my great surprise, became a very dear friend. He was a Benedictine monk. And I didn't ever anticipate that I would have among my close friends a Benedictine monk. I'm not a Christian, or at least not really a Christian, but he was a genius with friendship and a very intuitive, insightful man. And he wrote to me intuitively, out of the blue almost at that time, and said it was time for me to stop teaching, that as much as my students might appreciate the teaching, and that I needed to shift my focus to my own work and focus on that and give my writing my full attention, or at least apart from the other things that I always was doing in my life. So to make it my work. And so that was a change that I did make. I stopped doing contract teaching, which I had been doing after I retired. I stopped doing contract research work, which I had also been doing. And I just was living on the income that I had, which I found was quite adequate for what I needed to do. And so that was an important change for me. And it was different from you, Penn, because I had, unlike you, not been primarily a writer through that period when I was also an employee and working full-time. I did continue writing, but I did it more or less on the back burner, and when I could find time or carve some time out of my other activities.
And we have another question that has come in, and it's, what is your best advice to young poets who are beginning their careers?
You know that word, spam, 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 spam? Well, I would say, read out loud, read to your friends, read at open mics, read. And make it a practice. As Jane says, poetry requires full attention. Even if you only have 5 minutes a day, make it a full expression of all you are.
And I think I would add to that, trust your inner voices. And I have kept notebooks and journals all my life. Well, not all my life, but since my 20s. And they are often the places where I start poems. And when I am getting ready to work on a book, I go through my my notebooks and my journals, and I tag things that I started in them. I often, after I've written about a dream, write what I call a proto-poem. I sort of let the dream provide words and give me images.
Mhm.
And I go through just those prompts, and I just sit quietly and let the poem articulate itself
Yeah.
as a draft on the page. And then after I've totally forgotten what's in the notebook, I'll go back and read through it and tag things that I still find interesting, and then begin to work with those. So I think don't expect, for young poets or beginning poets, don't necessarily expect to get anything that resembles a fully formed poem in a first draft. Just keep drafting and thinking and spending time with it and coming back to it, and trust that the words and the voices will bring it to you and that it will emerge.
I think you might get one fully formed Venus arising poem in a lifetime. I think Randall Jarrell said poem is where lightning strikes once, and a genius poem is where it strikes twice. But for me, the more interesting way of writing is to let the words lead, to let the poem express itself, that there a kind of belief, animistic perhaps, of what wants to come through you, what you're here to be a vehicle for. Interesting.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I think that it brings us to a close today, and I want to thank you both again very much for being part of this session. Penn, Jane, I want to thank. I really want to thank everybody who attended, and I want to thank Words Fest and everybody involved in putting it on for continuing this wonderful festival in a strange year, and for doing such a wonderful job of it. And
more poetry to come at 3 p.m.
And more poetry to come at 3 p.m. Yeah. So stay tuned. Thank you again, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us here today.
Bye-bye.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye, Jane.
Bye, Penn.